Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Wyndham, and I am the founder and program manager for Walking Out of the People's Shoes. We are a digital platform that we help to empower women of color voices through storytelling and community. And these is one of the ways that we empower women and people is through our programming. And the Multicultural Children's Book Club is a club every month. Every first Thursday we meet. We will have a featured book, and then we will have an art demo, and we have a giveaway, and we've got a special guest coming. So you guys going to have hopefully a great time. I just want to introduce you to our great, amazing facilitators that we have. We have Mia, and Mia blogs on parenting, children's books, and education at pragmaticmom.com, and is the co-creator of Multicultural's Children's Book Day, a nonprofit celebrating diversity in children's books. Amy Tai is a Taiwanese American artist and an educator based in Brooklyn. So I will also send out links, any resources that we will have. We will also post the session on our website at walkinginothepeopleshoes.com. You can share it with your friends or family, anyone who's interested to learn more about diversity through children's books. So I'm going to give it to Mia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited today to talk about Juneteenth and to present Carole Boston Weatherford's book. And just because, Juneteenth is not my cultural heritage, I just wanted to let everyone know that the three of us watched a webinar hosted by the publisher, Lee and Low, and where there were multiple educators, and we learned in depth about Juneteenth and how to present it. And so a little bit about Carole Boston Weatherford. She has written more than 60 children and young adult books, and she writes in the space of African American history that is typically left out of history books. And so a couple examples, I just happen to have her books. A couple of her books here is Box, is one of her new ones, which is about Henry Miller. And she wrote it in rhyme, like with, I think, 6 lines to kind of replicate a box. So it's a pretty amazing book. That's a recent one. And then the other one I have here is, this is a Caldecott honor book about Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a civil rights activist. But what's amazing about Juneteenth Jamboree is this actually was her very first book. Before that, she was a published poet in the adult space. And so it's kind of nice to kind of go full circle and, start with her very first book. And so I thought it's illustrated by Yvonne Buchanan. So I thought I would just share a few of my favorite pages, and just to tee up the story, since I'm not going to read the whole book. The book is about a family who has moved to Texas, and there's a little girl and her parents. And the parents are kind of excited to be back in Texas because this is where they grew up. So they have all kinds of relatives, back in their hometown where they moved to, aunts and uncles and grandparents. But for the little girl, she's never lived in Texas. So now it's summertime, so there's no school yet. And she's a little anxious about like, what is it going to be like here in Texas? Like, I just really want to make a friend. And so she wakes up one morning and there's just like a lot of excitement in her house. Her family's, they're making all kinds of food, and it's just kind of buzzing. And so she knows there's something special that's going to happen, but they don't tell her what it is. They're like, just wait, we'll show you. So it's like the surprise that she's going to get. And so the first page I want to share with you is this page. And I'll just read 3 pages. And so here she is now. The family has now taken all the food and they've gotten dressed up, and now they're going to the square, and she's kind of going to learn about what's going on. So within minutes, they arrived downtown. They parked at the church and left the food in the fellowship hall. Then they walked to the square. It seemed like the whole town was there. Some girls from Cassandra's school walked arm in arm in their long skirts and pinafores. Her parents pointed to a banner that flapped in the breeze. This is the banner. Juneteenth, giggled Cassandra. What kind of word is that? Why, that's the surprise, honey, said Aunt Bet. It means June 19th, Dad explained. That's when Texas slaves heard they'd been freed. President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, but the news didn't reach Texas until more than 2 years later. No one knows for sure what took so long, but you better believe people rejoiced when they finally found out. And then my next page I want to share kind of tees up part of my giveaway. And so now they're like kind of in that square and there's a bunch of people celebrating, a lot of celebration going on. And so here we have a bearded man carving a cane, spun tales of the first Juneteenth. Some folks say the messenger took 2 years to reach these parts because his mule was slow. Others say slave owners wanted to harvest one more cotton crop, so they kept the news from their slaves. Me, I don't know whether to blame the mule, the messenger, or the master. One thing is sure, though, freedom was a long time coming, but it was mighty sweet. Cassandra heard her father whisper, Amen. So I'm gonna like hone in on that word sweet because I'm doing a giveaway and it's what I consider a book club in a box. So I'm giving moon pies, these mini ones. I think there's 12 total because that's like a Southern kind of like a Southern ding dong, I would say. And then I'm giving this away to 2 bags of this, which is beaver nuggets. And these are specifically made in Texas. They are from Lake Jackson, Texas. And my friend in Austin assures me this is a wildly beloved snack. And it is also sweet. So I'm giving away 2 packages of the nuggets along with the book. And then Amy's also giving away her sample art that she'll be creating today. And so that if anyone wants to recreate a book club in a box on June 18th for classroom, library, or just for a group of children, you're going to be all set. So my final page is actually almost the very end of the book. And they've celebrated, and now Cassandra, the little girl, is kind of, contemplating like what she's just learned. So this is Cassandra. She imagined slave families celebrating their newfound freedom, jumping, shouting, laughing, and crying, their spirits taking wing like birds released from cages. The balloon soared higher and higher. So they did in the book, kind of like a wish where they wrote their names on balloons and then released them. And so, so that's Juneteenth Jamboree. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And now I'm going to pass it to Amy, who has a pretty incredible art project to go along with the Juneteenth theme.
All right. So I just wanted to give you some context before we start the art project. This book is Juneteenth Jamboree is such a great book as a supplement to either if you're a teacher, a unit you're teaching, or even throughout the school year where you were teaching U.S. history, not just highlighting Black history, but U.S. history through Black history. So when we went to the webinar for Lee and Lowe, they really stressed the importance of teachers and parents to see through U.S. history through a different lens, and to not just teach in isolation a group of people's history in our country, especially to show kind of that we are all the fabric of this country. And so it's to teach about Juneteenth, we need a really strong development of U.S. history to be taught to the kids, to engage in the Juneteenth content, and to understand and teach also the Emancipation Proclamation, teaching culture as resistance and not whitewashing or diminish the importance of Juneteenth and its meaning. And so concepts that your students or your children might need to know before the pre-teaching or during the teaching or the content taught after the book is a fundamental understanding of the institution of slavery. And it's teaching hard history, but it is very, very necessary to really understand and grasp the importance of Juneteenth. And so I want to start by showing you a very child-friendly video that I found on Brain Pop that's really good to engage this very hard to teach part of the history that's a very fundamental part of our freedom for everyone. So let me just share my video by sharing my screen.
I'm getting notes of bubblegum and cotton candy. Dear Nat and Moby, can you tell us about Juneteenth? From Miss Safford's class. Sure. Juneteenth is short for June 19th. On that date in 1865, enslaved people in Galveston Bay, Texas learned they were free. 2,000 Union troops showed up with the news. The Civil War was over, and so was slavery in the South. The news had taken a while to reach Texas, the westernmost state in the Confederacy. Juneteenth celebrates that day, when the last enslaved people in the South were set free. The Emancipation Proclamation had made it official. That was an executive order issued by Abraham Lincoln in the middle of the Civil War. It said that all enslaved people in the states, in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. Meaning, it applied to the Confederate states, but not to the slave states that stayed in the Union. That's because Lincoln wanted to keep his allies in those states happy. Slavery continued there for months after the Civil War ended. The 13th Amendment outlawed it across the land in December 1865, a half year after Juneteenth. Well, the Emancipation Proclamation was still a big step forward. For one thing, it allowed Black men to enlist in the Union military. Nearly 200,000 Black troops went on to fight for the freedom of their brothers and sisters. But more importantly, it placed the Union squarely on the side of freedom, which meant enslaved people could escape across Union lines, and 500,000 of them did. Every Union victory brought an expansion of freedom. In each area of the Confederacy it conquered, enslaved people were freed. But as Union troops advanced, lots of slaveholders took their operations west. Many found refuge in a place far from the fighting, Texas. Until Major General Gordon Granger came to Galveston on Juneteenth. Standing on the balcony of the Confederate headquarters, he read from General Order Number 3. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. Newly freed people danced, cried, sang, and started to make plans. Word spread quickly across Texas. 7-year-old Molly Harrell was enslaved on a plantation over 200 miles north of Galveston. She said, "Me and my mother left right off. We all walked down the road singing and shouting." If only it were that easy. Many white Southerners refused to accept Black people as their equals. The most hateful began a campaign of terror, attacking and killing Black people across the South. Defying these threats, Black Texans observed the first anniversary of Juneteenth. Back then, it was also called Emancipation Day or Jubilee Day. They sang spirituals, ate barbecue, played games, and recited the Emancipation Proclamation, even though the threat of violence was always there. The country passed several constitutional amendments to protect the rights of Black Americans. But down south, state and local authorities refused to obey these laws. Instead, they did everything they could to make Black people second-class citizens. First, Black Southerners were prevented from voting, so they had no influence in government. Then, laws were passed to bar Black people from participating in everyday life. They couldn't eat with white people, go to the same schools, or use the same water fountains. Black citizens had to live in separate neighborhoods and could only hold lower-paying jobs. And they had to treat white people like they were superior. Try to fight it, and you risked jail time, violence, and even death. This policy of segregation or separation lasted for 100 years. Still, Juneteenth persevered. Celebrating became an act of resistance and a show of strength. And Black communities got creative about making celebrations possible. Because of segregation, many public parks were off limits to Black Texans. So they sometimes pooled funds to purchase their own land. In Houston, in 1872, ministers raised money to buy 10 acres, creating Emancipation Park. It became a safe place to gather on Juneteenth for decades. Smaller celebrations were held in people's homes and in churches, too. Juneteenth slowly spread through the country beginning in the 1910s. That was the start of the Great Migration, when millions of Black Southerners sought a better life in the North. As people from Texas joined the migration, the holiday went with them. Then, during the 1950s and 60s, Juneteenth got even bigger. Black people connected their fight for equal rights to the fight to end slavery. Juneteenth embodied all of the pain and triumph of their shared history. Celebrations now featured parades and fireworks, street fairs and rodeos, and presentations about Black heritage. Red food and red drinks symbolized the blood of the enslaved and their resilience in bondage. And in 1980, Texas declared Juneteenth a state holiday. Since then, 47 states have recognized it as a holiday or day of observance. Yeah, there's recently been a push to make it a federal holiday. That's when government workers get a paid day off, and most everyone else does too, like we have for Independence Day. In fact, some people think of Juneteenth as America's second Independence Day. 'Cause the 4th of July only commemorates when white Americans gained independence, while Juneteenth is about when all Americans became free. Making it a federal holiday may not seem like such a big deal, but what a country chooses to honor and celebrates speaks to its core values. And freedom and equality for everyone are values I think we can all get behind. Nice! You baked a Juneteenth cake. We're not supposed to use actual red velvet. Blech.
That was a great video.
I'm
Amy
so
just needs to
glad.
get back.
That was so awesome. I loved it. Thank you for sharing.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that they were able to present the facts in a very, very visual way, and in a way that you could see the timeline, which I thought was really kid friendly for all levels, K through 12. So if you're a teacher or a parent, I think it's a great resource to be using to teach about Juneteenth, and also paired with picture books, fictional, realistic fiction, and historical fiction, like the resources that we have. Lee and Lowe actually came up with a list of really great picture books to go along with teaching about Juneteenth. And obviously Carole's book is one of them, which we can probably send that list a little later at the end, or maybe after this event. So why don't we get to the art project? So what really resonated with me about that video, and also what Carole said at the Lee and Lowe webinar, was that Juneteenth and the celebration of Juneteenth is an act of resistance and strength, showing resistance and strength. And there's just so many different ways we could, come up with crafts and art projects for this book. But I thought one that was a little bit more symbolic was the Juneteenth flag collage, which I can teach you how to make right now. And also I have another one that's tailored more towards the storyline of Carole's book. So to make this collage, all you'll need is construction paper. So you need a red construction paper and a blue. When I'll talk about the significance of these colors in a second, and also a piece of white construction paper. You'll need any drawing tool and glue stick and any shape that's round, like a roll of tape. If you like to make it with me right now and you don't have any colored construction paper, you could just use white paper and you can color in the sections red and white if that's something that you have. So let me just adjust my iPad so you could see an aerial view of.
And we're also supplying templates, right?
Yes.
So if you want to do this project with a group or with kids, there's Amy created templates to cut out the shapes.
Yes. So I'll give you the construction paper and also give you a template for the star and the burst that we see in the flag. So to start this project, we will draw a long wavy line in the middle of this blue construction paper. And as I'm going through this project step by step, I'll tell you about the symbols on this Juneteenth flag. So there is a horizon line in the back of this flag to show new horizons for Black Americans during that time. It was a new start, a new chapter. So the horizon shows the potential of new life and a better life. So now we have two pieces cut, and you're going to take your red piece of paper and you're going to put it underneath your blue paper. So I'm going to try and do this right side up for all of you viewers. If you could really see, there we go. Okay. And that should be about half the length of the rectangle. And the next part is we're just going to glue the top to the bottom. Oops. Oh. Okay. The next symbol on this flag is the burst, the star and then the burst. And the burst is actually symbolic of the nova, which is a term that astronomers use to mean a new star. So again, the concept of a new chapter in America is why the designer for this flag chose the burst. And the designer for this flag, I forgot to tell you, is an activist named Ben Haith, and he's the founder of the National Juneteenth Celebration Foundation. And he created this flag in 1997 with the help of some illustrators, a Boston-born illustrator named Lisa Graff. So for the nova, a neat trick is, the nova is the trickiest part. It's that big kind of burst, right? And you kind of want it to be circular and symmetrical. So a neat trick is you just fold a piece of white paper in half, and on the close folded side, you're going to get your round template or tool to help you draw the shape. And you're only going to kind of place the round object about halfway down this fold. You're going to draw your burst or nova, and there's actually 12 points altogether. So you're going to make 6 triangles, zigzags, and you want to leave some space in between. So I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And once you cut it out, it's going to give you a very symmetrical burst. So I'm just gonna do this a little quickly. And for the packet I'll send out, I already have the burst in cardstock, so as a template, so you wouldn't have to struggle too much with it. And then to make this, to block out this section, you can draw, again, a double zigzag line. And then you want to keep this centerpiece that you cut out because it gives you a good measurement for the star that's going to go in the middle. And we are going to draw the star on that piece. Okay, so we have the burst. Here we go. And we can place that in the center of the flag. The star, as a symbol on this flag, actually symbolizes Texas, the Lone Star State. And so that is why there's a star in the middle of this burst. And I'm going to just draw the star on that leftover piece I have, cut that out, and I should get a nice star that fits well in the middle. And so when you're creating this project, there's so many ways you can have discussions with your students about, or your children about the symbolism in the flag. You can even ask them, why do you think the designers for this flag chose red and blue as the background colors? And some of them might say, well, we see those colors, red and blue, on our American flag, our country's flag. And you can even ask them, very higher order thinking questions like, well, what does that represent? Why did the designer choose those specific colors? And you can emphasize that those colors represent America. And so this Juneteenth flag represents that. It's a reminder that the enslaved people in our country and their descendants were and are Americans, and they are the fabric of our country. We are that they from early onward, they were the foundation of so much in our country's history. So that is why they used the blue and the red to kind of signify the importance of what it means to be an American. So then you can glue those pieces on, and you should get the flag. If you want something that's more personalized and tailored to this book, another project you could do is you could recreate the scene in the book where Kufi, the brother of Cassandra, the main character, is showing the children at the fair, at the celebration, how they can put little slips of paper with their names, and also a very important phrase about freedom and what freedom means to them inside the balloons. And so you could do something, if you have balloons, you could obviously do the same exact activity, but if you don't, you could also get a Ziploc bag and draw the shape of a balloon on it, which I've drawn and cut out already. So you can cut that out. And then you could get another piece of construction paper. Again, I'm using the red and blue themed papers. And you can glue your balloon onto the red piece of paper, and you can cut it out. So what that would look like would be, you could just glue the sides. And you'll also notice that there is an opening, right, for the side of the balloon that I cut out from the Ziploc bag. And after you glue it on, whoops, sorry, my iPad is falling. So after you glue it on, whoops, okay. Oh wait, I think Carole's here. So after you glue it on, okay, I'm so sorry. My iPad keeps falling. Okay, there we go. So after you glue the balloon off, the piece of Ziploc bag on, you can cut the shape of the balloon.
You want to get your calendar?
And again, this is the part in the book when Kufi was showing how you could write some meaningful statements about freedom on slips of paper and putting it in the balloon. And then you could take the blue piece of paper and you can place this balloon on top of the blue and draw the rest of the balloon and decorations around to show that part of the celebration in the Juneteenth celebration where they were setting the balloons free. And you can get, little slips of paper to write what freedom means for people in our country. Or you could even, make it fancy by writing it on stars, and you can place it inside the balloon just like so. And then by the end, if you're a classroom teacher, you can make this a really big chart, and they can actually place in more stars throughout the school year as their concept of freedom, and as they're learning more in depth about US history, what the concepts of freedom mean to them. So this could be a mini one that you could have at home if you're a parent, or you can make a larger version of this for a chart in your classroom. And I see that Carole just joined us. Welcome, Carole. Thank you so much for coming.
Welcome.
I'm glad to be here. And Juneteenth Jamboree was my first book. It came out in 1995. And it was a book that I was, a subject that I was asked to write about. So it happened, a little differently than most of my projects since then have occurred. And so I was asked to write about Juneteenth because the editor then thought that Juneteenth was going to be the next big thing. And lo and behold, 26 years later, she was right. So Juneteenth, here's Juneteenth Jamboree. It's illustrated by Yvonne Buchanan. It was a fine day for daydreaming. Breathing in aromas of apple cobbler and tater pie, Cassandra gazed out her bedroom window. Her brother Kufi was in the backyard swinging. Her mind drifted to the city and the friends she left behind. She liked her new house, and her new school was okay, but what would summer here in Texas hold? This was her parents' hometown, but it didn't feel like home yet to Cassandra. "Come lend me a hand," her mother called. Cassandra raced into the kitchen, then stopped in her tracks. Dishes lined the countertop. From the looks of the place, her parents had big plans. "What's going on?" It's a surprise, replied her mother. Cassandra thought for a moment. It wasn't anyone's birthday. "What kind of surprise?" she asked. "A Texas tradition," said her father as he bent down to kiss the top of her head. "You'll see." Cassandra helped make red velvet cake while her father fried chicken. Her dad was whistling, and every once in a while he danced over to where her mother was working and twirled her around as if they were dancing at a fancy party. Cassandra loved surprises, and she was usually pretty good at guessing them, but this one had her stumped. She was so deep in thought that she jumped when the doorbell rang. "See who it is, Cassie," her mother said. Cassandra could smell her Aunt Bet's rolls even before she opened the door. Texas didn't feel like home yet, but at least it meant that they were closer to family, especially her favorite aunt. "How's my beautiful niece?" Aunt Bet asked. "Fetch me an apron, would you, baby? Then get some clothes from your mama. We've got to get this ham ready." Cassandra decided to see if her aunt would give her any clues about what kind of surprise was brewing. "Are we having company?" she whispered. Aunt Bet winked at Cassandra's mother and just kept on humming and glazing the ham with honey. "Come on, child, you can help us with this part." Cassandra carefully stuck cloves into the ham and placed pineapple rings on it. My, that looks pretty, Aunt Bet sighed as she slid the ham into the oven. Koofy and Dad busily snapped string beans while Mama began packing a picnic basket. Cassandra had never seen so much food, but she was more curious than hungry. Why the feast? Memorial Day had passed, and the 4th of July was still 2 weeks away. Time to get dressed, Cassie, said Mama. But I am dressed, said Cassandra. Her mother hurried upstairs. Just you wait, she said, lifting a calico dress from a pine chest. This is the best part of the surprise. Cassandra loved to dress up. In fact, her mother sometimes scolded her for getting into her closet. And now she was letting her wear this beautiful dress. First her father dancing in the kitchen, and now this. Whatever the surprise was, it sure was making her parents act funny. She looked in the mirror. The outfit was yellow and blue, the colors of the Texas sun and sky. My grandma made this costume for me when I was your age and surprised me with it on the same day. Costume, thought Cassandra. It's not Halloween. June bugs are jumping and the leaves are all green. Dad honked the horn. Everyone piled into the car. Cassandra sat next to Koofy on the back seat, holding a cake plate and shooing her little brother's fingers away from the frosting. The car smelled just like the kitchen. All this surprise business was making her hungry. Within minutes, they arrived downtown. They parked at the church and left the food in the fellowship hall. Then they walked to the square. It seemed like the whole town was there. Some girls from Cassandra's school walked arm in arm in their long skirts and pinafores. Her parents pointed to a banner that flapped in the breeze. Juneteenth, giggled Cassandra. What kind of word is that? Why, that's the surprise, honey, said Aunt Bet. It means June 19th, Dad explained. That's when Texas slaves heard they'd been freed. President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, but news didn't reach Texas until more than 2 years later. Nobody really knows for sure what took so long, but you'd better believe folks rejoiced when they finally found out. Imagine, sighed Mama. Cassandra tried to picture what it was like for people to hear such news. I bet they sang and danced and had a big barbecue, she exclaimed. Fiddlers began to play. Cassandra clapped. Aunt Bet slapped her hip. I want to see the ducks, Koofy begged. He and Dad walked to the pond. At a picnic table, Cassandra learned to make a corn husk doll. I'll call her Lizzie, she declared. A girl in a pink pinafore leaned over to look at the doll. Lizzie's my name, too, she said, smiling. As Cassandra introduced herself, Lizzie's mother called her from another picnic table. I've got to go, Lizzie said, but I'll see you later. Cassandra hoped so. A Texas summer might not seem so long with a new friend. Look, balloons, yelled Koofy, tugging Dad across the square. The family weaved through the crowd toward the balloon booth. Can I have one? Koofy blurted. Not so fast, the balloon man said, giving them slips of paper. First, sign your name. But there's already writing on it, said Cassandra. Forever free, she read aloud. Use the other side, said the man. He slid Cassandra's paper into a balloon, then blew it up while she helped Koofy write his name. Hold on to it now, he urged, winking. Under a shade tree, women showed off baskets and brightly colored patchwork quilts they'd made with their own hands. On stage, masked dancers whirled grass skirts to African drum beats. Lizzie ran over and invited Cassandra to promenade around the square with the other girls in costume after dinner. Cassandra's parents were greeted by old friends they hadn't seen in years. A bearded man carving a cane spun tales of the first Juneteenth. Some folks say the messenger took 2 years to reach these parts because his mule was slow. Others say slave owners wanted to harvest one more cotton crop, so they kept the news from the enslaved. Me, I don't know whether to blame the mule, the messenger, or the master. One thing is sure, though. Freedom was a long time coming, but it was mighty sweet. Cassandra heard her father whisper, Amen. At noon, the church bells pealed. The high school band marched down the street. A man on stilts towered over the crowd. A choir sang spirituals that the enslaved had once sung in the fields. Aunt Bet shook a tambourine and sang along. As the parade ended, the Grand Marshal said, when the cymbals sound, let go of your balloons all at once. Clash, clang, hundreds of balloons carrying messages of freedom floated toward the clouds. Cassandra's eyes followed her balloon high up into the sky until she could no longer tell it from the others. She imagined enslaved families celebrating their newfound freedom, jumping, shouting, laughing, and crying, their spirits taking wing like birds released from cages. The balloons soared higher and higher. In the midst of her daydreaming, Cassandra felt Aunt Bet squeeze her hand and glimpsed her wiping a tear. Don't be sad, Aunt Bet. You'll get another balloon one day. I'm not sad, honey, just filled up. I'm so thankful that you're home and we're all together. Me too, said Cassandra, giving her aunt a big hug. Me too. So that is Juneteenth Jamboree. And I want to just give you just a little bit of backstory. One thing is that people thought that the son, Kufi, was modeled after my son, Jeffrey. He was not. In fact, I'm not even sure the illustrator knew that I had a son. I still to this day have not met Yvonne Buchanan, although I like her work. I have an artist friend who, when this book came out, said, "Did she know that you collect grapes and that you have grapes on your wallpaper in your kitchen?" And I said, "No, she didn't, but there are grapes on the wallpaper." And Cassandra was at a table with other girls making a corn husk doll. And when I first started sharing this book, I'm going to stop screen sharing. I decided that I would get a corn husk doll to take to schools with me. So this is my corn husk doll. She is at least 25 years old now. I keep her in a little baggie. She no longer travels with me. I don't get to share this book very often. But if any boys and girls are watching, I would love for you to suggest a name for this doll. The doll in the story was called Lizzie. But if you can suggest a name for this doll, I will consider it because she's much too old to not have a name. So that's just a little bit of backstory about Juneteenth Jamboree. And I'll turn it back over to Amy or Mia or Ellie, somebody.
Thank you so much, Carole. It sounds like we had someone gave us a suggestion. Her name should be Cornelia.
Cornelia? Oh, yeah. Cornelia. That makes sense. Yeah. Cornelia. I'm going to write that on a piece of paper and put it in her little bag.
Thank you, Letitia. I think it's Letitia.
Cornelia. Right? I like that.
I like that. Thank you so much for reading that. That was a special treat for all of us, and
it really was
really amazing. Thank you. I appreciate you to come.
Do we want to open it up to questions? If anyone had questions for Carole?
And I also have a picture of my enslaved ancestors, formerly enslaved ancestors. So I'm going to show those pictures real quick while we're waiting for some questions. I think I have it in this presentation. Yeah.
Well, I have one of your newest books here, Box. So right. I was wondering, because it's related to the same theme.
Sure, it is.
Just give us a little bit of why you wrote this book and, your process. I know you did the rhyming scheme to emulate a box, which I thought was really amazing.
Right, right. I wrote that because, first of all, it was actually a suggestion from a librarian. And when the librarian suggested it, the subject to me, there were no books yet about box. And I got a contract offer, and then the contract offer was withdrawn because they said, "Oh, there's another book about box coming out, and by the way, it's by Kadir." And I had just published Moses with Kadir Nelson, so the project got killed before I even could sign the contract. And so I kept working on it for some more years. And then another book about box came out. And lo and behold, it was illustrated by another illustrator that I had collaborated with. So now there were 2 picture books about box. And so I said, well, there are probably enough picture books about Henry Box Brown, who shipped himself from Richmond, Virginia to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to freedom in a wooden box. Excuse me, that's how he got his name. And so I decided that I would age up my manuscript, and instead of writing a picture book for early readers, that I would do something for middle grades. And the something that I did was to write a verse biography made up of 6-line poems. Each poem has 6 lines to correspond with the 6 sides of Henry's box. So that book came out more recently. And I want to show you the pictures of if you have any more questions, Mia, about box.
Sure. So is that poetry form? Is that like something that you created, or is that like a standard poetry form?
Oh no, a sestet is a standard form of poetry. It just means 6-line poem.
Oh, and it doesn't have a particular rhyming scheme?
No, it doesn't rhyme at all. There are no rhyming poems in that entire collection.
Oh, that's right.
They're all free verse, and they are written in first person in the voice of Henry Box Brown.
And did you research, like, Oh,
of course. In fact, he has a narrative. He wrote a narrative. He became an abolitionist after he freed himself, and so he gave speeches. He wrote a book. He on the lecture circuit, he didn't just stand at a lectern and speak. He had an artist paint what he called a panorama of slavery. So he traveled around with this panorama, and he had a box that he climbed in and climbed out of to reenact his own emancipation. He eventually had to leave the country because the Fugitive Slave Act was passed, and that meant that enslaved people who had run away and were up north could be arrested and returned to their masters. And so Henry Box Brown, rather than risking that, some enslaved people went to Canada. Many more went to Canada than went to London, but he went to London. And he continued with this act, and then he added another twist to it, and then it was magic. He decided he became a magician, and he called himself a mesmerizer, the great mesmerizer. And so I guess he did something like hypnosis. But one of the poems says that that was perhaps a fitting career, since he really was an escape artist, and the panorama of slavery that he created really amounted to what we now call performance art.
That's amazing. So the idea of having a 6-line poem, did that hit you like out of the blue, or was that something that you figured out right away, or did someone?
Well, once I decided that I was going to write for middle grades, yes, I came up with the idea of the 6-line poems. Yeah. And so, and what it did was I not only wanted the poems to approximate, the 6 sides of the box, but I also wanted to create a structure for myself that would mirror the oppression of slavery and also the confinement in the box. So I said I thought the 6-line structure was perfect for that subject matter. Yeah. So let me introduce you to a few of my ancestors, but I'll introduce you to Frederick Douglass first. That's Frederick Douglass. He, like Henry Box Brown, he was an abolitionist as well, and he freed himself, and then he became an abolitionist. He is perhaps probably the most famous abolitionist of the slavery era. And when Frederick Douglass was between the ages of 6 and 8, this was his home, Wye House. It's a plantation that is still standing in Talbot County, Maryland. And that's where my family comes from. This is my These are my great-great-grandfathers, and
Wow.
they were also enslaved at White House. And Frederick Douglass actually encountered and wrote about this man's grandfather. So I know more I know what my grandfather was like because Frederick Douglass wrote about him. You know, my grandfather, my he would have been my probably fourth or fifth great grandfather. You know, he didn't leave any, you know, any records. But because Frederick Douglass wrote about him, I know that he was referred to, his name was Isaac Copper as well, and he was referred to as Dr. or Minister Isaac Copper. And I don't
That
know
is
whether
amazing.
and I've traced him back to 1781 at White House, and it was not the same, was not even the same building at that same house at that time, because the original mansion was, or great house as they call it, was burned down during the Revolutionary War by the British.
So your lyrical gift could literally have been passed down from Isaac Copper.
You know, I hadn't thought about that, but I do have a more recent ancestor who was a minister as well. My mother's father was a minister. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
Wow.
but I hadn't,
That's
you know, actually,
incredible.
but thank you for that, because I have Jeffrey, my son Jeffrey and I collaborate, and one of our our most recent collaboration, I've done my part. He's just starting his part because he gets to wait until we actually have a contract to work on his part. But it's called Kin, and it is actually set at White House and written in the voices of our ancestors who were enslaved, as well as some of the other enslaved residents of White House and the slaveholders themselves.
Wow.
Thank you so much for sharing such an
Incredible.
Sure.
intimate and powerful part of your personal history with us. I feel so just honored to be able to see those photos. And one of our participants has a question for you, Carole. And L. Vernon in the chat said, I didn't learn about Juneteenth until much later in adulthood. Did you celebrate when you were younger?
No, I did not grow. Juneteenth was celebrated for the most part in Texas, where it is a state holiday, in Oklahoma, Kansas, and parts of Louisiana. So, you know, it was a regional celebration. And I did not even hear about Juneteenth. I'm not sure if I knew about it before the editor asked me to write about it or not, because that would have been she asked me to write about it in 1992. And I have a feeling I hadn't even heard about Juneteenth before, before I was asked to write about it. So many more people do know about it now, and many more communities celebrate it. Jeffrey and I are appearing at quite a few Juneteenth celebrations for libraries and for public schools and community organizations. And it's just one day. So, we're spreading ourselves around on June 19th, but also doing some Juneteenth presentations for organizations and mainly for schools and libraries the week prior to June 19th.
So we're recording this so that it's available in perpetuity. So hopefully some of your celebrations will be recorded as well, so people can access them and reference them for years to come.
Yeah, and of course I've written about slavery several times. Mia had me talk about Box, Henry Brown Mails Himself to Freedom, which came out last year. And but before that, I wrote about I wrote Freedom in Congo Square, which is set in New Orleans. Congo Square is a place where enslaved people and free Blacks were allowed to congregate on Sunday afternoons, and they could practice. They could speak their native tongues if they still knew them. They could practice their tribal religions. They could sell goods that they or produce that they had grown or made, And most importantly, they could just see people they didn't get to see during the week. And most importantly, they could play their instruments and do their dances. And so they could, unlike many places throughout the South, in Congo Square, drums were allowed. And so the existence of Congo Square in New Orleans actually led to New Orleans being the birthplace of jazz in
And I
the
just
early
want to
20th
add
century.
that I believe that book won a Caldecott honor, and also it is for a much younger age group. I believe
Right.
like 3 and up. So if you
Right.
have children of different ages, you could pair up Freedom in Congo Square with Box, or it's a great pairing, and then add in
Yeah.
Juneteenth
And
Jamboree as well.
it's really accounting and day of the week book. So it's a concept book. And one of the concepts that it sheds light on, in addition to counting and the days of the week, is the institution of slavery.
And it's
So
a really exuberant, like joyful book too.
right.
So that's
Yeah, it is. It is. It shows the labor. It gives a countdown of the days of the week and shows the labor that enslaved people engaged in. But then it on Sunday it goes with them to we go with them to Congo Square, where dancing and drumming take place, and celebration. So,
and for a contemporary, to tie it to contemporary times for kids who are wanting to connect history with the past. Carole also wrote the history of rap, and so you can sort of see the progression of music from African drumming, to rap, and that's also super fun.
the roots of rap.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's also an amazing book, but
One review,
just full of joy and history, but in a really fun way to access and appreciate the contributions of African Americans to our culture.
Yeah, and one reviewer, I can't remember which magazine or journal, but they said it was super duper fly. So I really appreciate that.
And then also, I believe I read something that if Carole Boston Weatherford were born in a different era, or were I don't know, like a 20-something, pretty sure she'd be a rapper, like a fly rapper.
Oh yeah, right. If I were, well, I just missed the boat on that, because I was born when when rap was just starting out, but I had no idea that the poems, some of the poems that I was writing, could have been raps. And I was probably much too shy, to stand up in front of people and perform back then anyway.
Never too late. Never too late.
I think maybe I've been writing rap all along and didn't know it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Carole. Thank you for your time tonight. And actually, we offer a giveaway at for our group members. So we're going to give
Book
this
Club in a
book club in a box.
Yes.
So Letitia, I think it's Letitia Verdon. I'm going to send you an email, and you are the winner for tonight. So I will send you an email so you can give me the mailing address so we can send that to you. And I hope you enjoy it. Share this book with people in your community. So thank you so much, Mia, for arranging all this. Thank you so much, Carole, for your time again. We really appreciate you reading your book to us and giving us the background, a little bit more of Juneteenth and your experience. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Mia, for facilitating tonight. We will have our monthly book club every first Thursday. So we will have our sign up. I think Mia has a book.
Yeah. So our July book club is going to focus on the Tokyo Olympics. So our main book will be Let's Go to Taekwondo by RM Kim. Taekwondo has been an Olympic sport for a really long time. Then we're also, just as a sort of like a side addition, we're going to also talk a little bit about Karate Kids, because that is a new Olympic sport just for the Tokyo Olympics and not for the Olympics after that. And then I'll do a 2-second, edition of Sumo Joe, which was one of the sports they considered to add for Tokyo Olympics, but karate ended up winning out. But I think
skateboarding. This is the first Olympics for skateboarding.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think it will surely be an exhibition sport, just because sumo is going to be happening in that time anyway. So this will be the main book for July, celebrating martial arts, Tokyo Olympics. So please come to that. We'll have the same thing, art project, snack, giveaway, and also a surprise guest.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you guys have a really great evening. Thank you again. And you can see the replay on the website, hopefully by next week. Okay.
Great.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Happy
Thank you.
Juneteenth, everyone.
Happy Juneteenth. Thank you.